Hello, everybody, and welcome to In Conversation. My name is James Campbell, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Gareth Dylan Smith and Bryan Powell, and we'll be talking about their new book series, Contemporary Music Making and Learning. Guys, how's it going? It's wonderful to have you on the podcast. I'm really glad you're both able to make some time for us today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So, Gareth, where are you calling in from?
I am in the Poconos right now, East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. I work at Boston University, or for Boston University. I work a lot online for them. I'm an assistant professor of music education at Boston University.
And Bryan, what about yourself? Where are you calling in from, and what's your sort of role and your position?
Yeah, I'm calling in from northern New Jersey in the U.S. I'm an associate professor of music education and music technology at Montclair State University. And I also wear a couple other hats. I'm the chief program officer for Music Will, which is a United States-based nonprofit organization that supports contemporary music in schools. And I'm also the executive director of the Association for Popular Music Education, an international organization that brings together folks and non-government organizations and professors and musicians who are interested in promoting popular music education. So glad to be here, and thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. No, I really do appreciate the time. And Bryan, just to continue with what you just said there, what would you say are your kind of key research interests?
Yeah, so this won't take long because there's only a few things that interest me. Popular music education might seem obvious, but based on my experience as a music teacher, I started engaging in popular music in the classroom and saw how that kind of engaged more and more students. And so I think the umbrella of what interests me is just really looking at experiences that are going to engage more students in music education, largely focused on popular music technology, and just experiences that are kind of widen the door to music participation. So that's been the focus of my research over the last 10 to 15 years or so.
Great. And Gareth, what about yourself? How would you define your research interests?
So popular music education has been a through line, I suppose. Bryan and I co-founded the Journal of Popular Music Education, although we recently stepped aside from that. Recently, well, in fact, the whole time I've been interested in drummers and drumming as well. So I tend to do some research on that and theories that interest me. I'm interested in eudaimonia, for instance, kind of the notion of collective thriving. And so I think drumming and thriving, that's probably at the center of it all. And so for me, music making is really what I care about a lot. And I'm keen to get perspectives of people who make music and hear about people's experiences making music, which can sometimes be not ignored as much as just, I suppose, left out of a lot of sort of cultural studies narratives, for instance. So to hear from the actual people making the music.
Okay. And what about yourself, Gareth? Do you make music yourself? Is that a part of your kind of career or part of your sort of personal interests?
Relentlessly, yeah. Is it part of my career? Yes, I think so. Last week, as part of my job, certainly at the university where I work, I was playing drums in the unusual context of a Shakespeare production, A Midsummer Night's Dream, with drum solos, as I think God intended. And my partner and I, Ostina Lee, we worked together doing Beethoven and Mozart piano sonatas with drums. But in my I guess my true colors as a drummer, I'm a rock drummer, and I play in a handful of rock bands, recording things and gigging a lot. Got two gigs this weekend, so I can't stop making music. Is the truth. It never quite became my full-time career, but it's certainly a full-time occupation. How about that?
Great, thank you for sharing that. And Bryan, do you play or do you produce music in some way, shape, or form?
I don't gig as much as Gareth does, but I play kind of all the popular music instruments, play in a faculty band here at the university, sit in with student ensembles whenever I can, and my most recent kind of musical performance interest has been in DJing, and so I just got a new DJ controller deck, and I've started committing to doing gigs in the next coming months that are forcing me to kind of, get my craft together, so to speak. And so DJing is my kind of new passion. But I'd like to play in rock bands and sit in and, do whatever I can to stay active as a music maker as well.
I would add that actually I put out my first solo album a couple of years, was it last year? I think, yeah, last summer. And Bryan and I have a track on there together. It's an album of duets. So I think track 17, I believe, is Bryan and I, Highland Blue is the song.
I think anyone who is watching this video to this point already is familiar with that album and is a big fan of our track 17.
On heavy rotation, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, well, that piece, it's a lot of electronic music, improvisation, exploration, kind of digital synthesis, things like that. So people can go check it out if they're interested.
Well, I'm going to say we do a fine selection of playlists these days to support our books and journals. So it sounds like you two are next up on the hit list for creating some playlists. So watch this space, everybody. Before we start talking about the book series, though, I would like to just ask you a little bit about maybe the journal, because Gareth, you just mentioned that, the Journal of Popular Music Education. Could you just tell us briefly, I know you guys have stepped aside, but you did found the journal. And I think the last time I saw you was when we were launching the thing in person, anyway. So that was some time ago, but the journal has gone from strength to strength. And I think there's another special issue on hip hop coming out, I think, isn't there, as well, which I'm really excited about. And the first special issue that you guys did on hip hop all those years ago was one of the reasons that we ended up, finalizing that Journal of Global Hip Hop Studies, which is a diamond open access journal that we now publish. So, the popular music education has been quite instrumental in opening up different topics and genres to intellect through our journal program. But Gareth, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what the sort of aims and scope of the journal is and why you guys feel it's kind of an important publication that people should be aware of.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's really cool to know that it, has sort of helped spur so much other interest, intellect, and activity. Well, initially, I had the idea for the journal, and very quickly, came to Bryan with it because I needed a cool and capable collaborator. But the kind of impetus for it for me was I was teaching popular music in a higher education context in the UK, and had just got my doctorate and was going to popular music studies conferences and music education conferences, and finding that really at the popular music studies conferences, no one was talking much about education, and at the music education conferences, no one was talking much about popular music. And it seemed to be this kind of hybrid area where I worked didn't kind of have a home, and so it seemed like maybe we should create somewhere. And we spoke to lots of Bryan and I, spoke to a lot of senior colleagues in the field, all of whom endorsed the idea, and Intellect generously helped us put the project together. But I think initially that was the idea. I think it's, as you say, it's gone from strength to strength and certainly grown beyond what we could have imagined and what our initial ideas were. But it was to find a space for something that didn't really exist, which, Bryan mentioned he's executive director of the Association for Popular Music Education. And again, that didn't exist until it existed. There was these kind of things that were sort of circling around that, but not something that specifically dealt with popular music education, which is about as vague a term as you could hope for, but also occupies a space that nothing else did.
Bryan, anything to add to that?
No, I would just say in the decade since we started it, another sign of success is that we're seeing an increasing number of articles focused on popular music being published outside of the Journal of Popular Music Education, which in some way is a sign of success in this kind of growing area of study, that we don't have to, nor did we want to silo all research about popular music education in the journal. We certainly want to create a home for that, but anytime we see other popular music education articles published in other journals, it's just a sign of the kind of field growing, and I think that's an exciting thing to see that progress that's happened over the last decade or so.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there as well, as well, both of you do, that often, you have one of these ideas and it's bringing many different factors and different groups from around the world together and then unifying them with one sort of rough vision or mission. And then often you'll find that a journal is a real linchpin there that can then help either create an association or the association creates the journal. And it just sounds that we're in a really healthy position now. So congratulations to you both. And I'd just also say, if anyone's interested in finding out a bit more about that journal, just go to intellectbooks.com and you can search for the Journal of Popular Music Education. And there's all the call for papers will be up there. And then, of course, you can also download a free issue, so you can take a look at that, have a read, and see what you think, and maybe submit your own research. So I would just highlight that for everyone.
Gareth and I stepped away not because we didn't believe in the journal anymore. We got tired of it. We think that part of our role in getting it started and curating it through its first decade, the responsible thing to do is to hand it on to the kind of next generation of editorial leadership. And so our colleague, Dr. David Knapp at Florida State University, is taking over as editor. We're really excited for the kind of fresh new ideas and new blood that, so to speak, that David's bringing into that journal. And so it's something that continues to grow. The journal is receiving more submissions than ever, which is exciting to see. And Gareth and I are staying involved to the extent that, David will have us, Gareth, kind of, we're both contributing to the journal, editing articles as they come in, and just kind of supporting the journal in any way we can.
Oh, fantastic. And that's to be applauded, because not everybody knows when they should step away from a journal. And the other thing is of course, you're stepping away after all the, a lot of the hard work's been done. Not to diminish how hard it is to manage and maintain a journal, but getting it off the ground, building the infrastructure, ironing out the creases, and creating like a brand really, and also just ensuring that everyone trusts the publication, the processes. That's really difficult. So again, congratulations to you both for the work you've already done, and we also can't wait to work with the next generation and see where the journal heads at a time when there's obviously a lot of really interesting material coming out of the field. Which does lead me on to contemporary music making and learning series, which is kind of one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the podcast today. So, I say it's a new book series, but obviously, as any of these academic series are, it's already been in the wings for quite a while. But you've got the first book is back, I think, hot off the press, and then of course there's another book just right behind that. So there'll be 2 books in the series published and out in the world before the end of the year, certainly, I believe. So big congratulations on that. But Gareth, I'll start with you. Could you just tell us a little bit about the series vision, like the vision and the scope, and what's it all about, and what can people expect?
Well, it's called, as you mentioned, Contemporary Music Making and Learning, which was deliberately broad in scope. I think I was a bit worried it might be too broad in scope, but we like that it's about making music and learning music. I think too often, learning music can sort of somehow be end up somewhat divorced from making music, which neither of us feels it should be, I think. So we wanted to have something that encompasses both, and contemporary music making and learning. So I think we chose the word contemporary to keep it relevant and or not that things that aren't contemporary not relevant. That's not what I mean. I think keep it current. That's the word. And inevitably, 10 years from now, contemporary is different from what it was now. Anyway, but I think the point is to focus on the kind of nounness of things. So it's not a historical journal, and contemporary, in the world of popular music, because that's popular music, broadly speaking, has been our musical home and what we both teach about, what we both teach, what we both played a lot of. But popular music is sort of an odd phrase that doesn't mean anything much outside of the academy, and it often means only kind of, especially given the kind of generation of people who are writing about popular music education, it can sound an awful lot like kind of middle-aged white man rock, which isn't the only thing popular music should be. It's far from that most of the time. So I think part of the reason we called it contemporary music making and learning was to make sure it is about contemporary music, which hopefully includes and suggests popular music, but it's not only music that's popular, it's not only music that's commercial. So I think that was I think that all of these words are slightly problematic, I think, but that was the idea. Excuse me. Was to take the word popular out there, but strongly imply it. And we'd say in there about looking for innovative approaches and radical methodologies and things like that, because the music education scholarly domain tends to be inherently conservative with a small c. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but we would like there to be this to be a space where people can maybe be a little bit less conservative and less constrained by certain not referencing sort of stylistic criteria or stylistic kind of constraints, and hopefully to the extent that it's possible in a scholarly book series, present their authentic voice, if you will. And scholarly prose is often not the best way to present one's authentic voice, but we'd like it to be. So I think it's I'll stop talking in a second, but yeah, music making, music learning, contemporariness, and the kind of the real people behind the prose, I think, is what we're interested in. And we're not the only place to offer this, of course. Other series do that, but that was the idea.
Oh, interesting. It's quite interesting that you kind of wanted to move away from that term popular music. I can see why that would be problematic and very easy to be misunderstood by lots of different stakeholders and groups. So I think, yeah, contemporary music making and learning does try and do a lot, but I think it's an advantageous sort of title and vision for the series. Bryan, let me bring you in here and talk a little bit about the scope and the approach. What would you say is the sort of the scope of the series, and how did you approach defining it? Were there any really clear areas that you were like, we have to include this and we don't want to try and do that, or has it been more organic than that?
Yeah, I know I'm repeating a couple of things that Gareth touched on, but one of the exciting opportunities was to allow the field to kind of define the parameters of what is happening in classroom spaces, but also in music learning and educational contexts outside of classroom spaces. In the US, we tend to think of music education through a very narrowly defined music education equals school music. But we know that most education in music and learning about music happens outside of school contexts. And so one of the exciting things for us in trying to create a broader doorway through which this scholarship could pass, so to speak, is seeing it come to fruition. The first book out is showcasing narratives of authors of color about their experiences. And then the next one's about DJing. And, the proposals that we're getting in are about kind of pushing back against neoliberal influences on music. And so the broad scope of what the field is kind of understanding as these contemporary learning approaches is, I think, evidence that there's a need for showcasing some of these stories, showcasing authors that aren't normally included, shining a light on certain music scenes that aren't normally included in scholarly writing. And so our goal in some ways, it was to create a space where authors could come and engage in the process with us without us narrowly defining like, okay, well, this is what popular music is, and this is what music education is, and kind of creating some boundaries that might limit instead of encourage submission and engagement in scholarly ideas. And so we're quite excited in the breadth of what people are sending us as proposals. And I think it's a reflection on our work with Intellect to be able to create a broad enough vision for what this series could be, that it doesn't just, so that we're not getting the same types of book proposals time and time again.
I just would say, from my perspective, it seems like people are really important in this series, and their perspectives, and I think that's where like a real diversity is coming from what I can see so far. And I can think that through the language you're using in the call for proposals, that's kind of quite clear too. And then the other thing is, a buzzword of the moment, but something that Intellect's always been really passionate about, and I know that you guys have through the work that I've read of yours, is this notion of interdisciplinarity as well. And I'd say that the series certainly welcomes the very interdisciplinary perspectives. In practical terms, you mentioned, Bryan, just a couple of the books that are already, they're published or about to be published. Could you just tell us again the sort of the titles of those ones? Because we've got what have we got?
Well, I happen to, it's a timely question because I just got this in the mail, and I believe Gareth has his waiting for him at Boston University, because we exchanged messages earlier today of like, hey, is this package for you and for me, because we ship things to different places. The first book, edited by Chris Kayari, Jason Thompson, and Reika is called If Colors Could Be Heard, Narratives About Racial Identity in Music Education. It's an edited book, again, featuring perspectives and narratives from authors of color. And it's, a lot of really rich stories. There are images throughout, and there's so many different contributions. It's really fantastic. The other contribution that is shortly forthcoming is called DJing in New York, Learning Processes of Underground Club DJs, by Ava Egoff. And it's this exciting opportunity to kind of, using this research of interviewing DJs from the early scenes in New York City, understanding their perspectives, kind of for making some of those connections with contemporary teaching and learning. And it's just a fascinating capture of a certain place in time, but also some kind of continuing integration of technologies and learning on the bandstand, so to speak, through mentorship opportunities and just all of the kind of connections of how DJs in New York City kind of learn the craft through the perspectives of those that were interviewed for the book.
Thanks, Brian. And that's quite timely, really, I think, because there's obviously a lot of interest in DJs at the moment. Quite a few famous DJs coming out of the woodwork and returning to the decks for the first time in many years. A few things, happening recently. So, and then of course, I think Mark Ronson's book as well about literally being his start as an underground DJ in New York. That might shine a bit of light on this topic. So hopefully, it does appeal to a broader audience than maybe it would have last year, because it seems to be quite a lot. It seems very pertinent. So perfect timing on that one. And Gareth, let me bring you in here as well. Like, fantastic, those two books, and again showing the range of topics that the series is going to cover. Is there anything in the wings that you're sort of really looking forward to? Are there any other projects under consideration that you can maybe tell us a little bit about? Anything that we can expect in future?
Sort of already mentioned this, but I think Eva Egolf's book and this If Colours Could Be Heard, I think the sort of a key point about them is to highlight perspectives of people who wouldn't be highlighted otherwise. And like you mentioned, Mark Ronson's book, like everyone has already heard of Mark Ronson, like he's super famous, and that's why we want his book, right? But I think there's one of my sort of bugbears, I suppose, as a scholar and as a musician, is kind of there's so much music out there and so much music making and so much music learning that is awesome, but just not famous. And I think that's one of the things you want to shine a light on in this book series, is how much cool stuff there is, and how much there's so much cool stuff going on in music making and music learning that isn't necessarily highlighted in Mark Ronson's book, for instance. Which is not to throw no shade on Mark Ronson's book, but just there's other cool stuff. So these anyway. So that's, I think, an important point. You asked me, sorry, about forthcoming books. There's I think, yes, just going under contract, and we should have a book from Norton York and Natasha Hendry and Tom Parkinson. Now, Norton York is a name known to many people in the UK, I think, but not perhaps beyond that. Norton is involved since the early 80s in setting up rock school exams and several higher education popular music programs across London and beyond. And what the book does is kind of get it's short. It's going to be short chapters. I think it's going to be 2 books, actually, because it's going to be such a massive undertaking. Is going to be chapters contributed by many of the key players in setting up sort of the first generation of popular music institutions across the UK in the sort of early 80s through the mid 90s, really. People who are setting up guitar schools and then kind of contemporary music schools, and how did they design curriculum, and what did it mean to try and what does a qualification look like, and just really kind of examining that history from that generation of folks who are in their 30s and 40s when they started doing this, and are now at retirement age, and kind of have this sort of legacy to look back on. So really, Norton came to us with that idea, and really, I think it's timely and exciting. So Austina Lee has a book coming out about, I think, cultural vibrancy is the current working title, which is looking at how to kind of focus on diversity and cultural competence and cultural responsiveness in a way in music education, but kind of honoring who people are. Anyway, it's a really nuanced and interesting piece of work. And we have other proposals that are not yet definitely forthcoming, but that we're excited about. And there's also a book Virginia Davis and I are working on, a drum kit studies sort of compendium, which will be hopefully in the works. Well, it is in the works. It should be out in the next couple of years. That's also a large undertaking. So yeah, there are a few things, and we've had discussions with various colleagues at conferences, about things that might come to fruition. And maybe a monograph isn't always the best answer to people's problems, but we're certainly always open to conversations about maybe there's a book.
Let me interject there quickly. In terms of formats, I assume you're open to monographs, to multi-authored monographs, to edited collections and anthologies. Is there? Would you accept shorter pieces, your kind of agenda-setting pieces, or is it more that kind of traditional, monograph edited collection?
I mean, we quite like, quite in the American sense, like the idea of a short, kind of pithy, get to the point, say what you came to say, provide a thought piece of sorts. They don't have to necessarily be, hundreds of pages and lots of different chapters and contributions. I think there's room, especially in kind of speaking from the higher ed side, sometimes those kind of pieces can be really great to have the students engage in the thoughts and the concepts there. One of the nice things, again, working with Intellect, is they've been a partner in a lot of these things. And so sometimes it comes back and it's like, well, hey, we want to go beyond the page count of what we normally would have considered. Is it 2 pieces? Can we rethink how we're going to put these things together? And Intellect's been really willing to go back and forth. And so I like the idea that, the first book here is an edited contribution from lots of different authors. And then our second book in the series is, from a single author. And I think we're open to all of the potential eventualities. And for anyone who has made it this far on the podcast and might be thinking of something or have an idea, Gareth and I love to engage in the conversations. It doesn't need to be something where you have to fill out the entire proposal and send it to us and say, hey, is this a thing that you would consider? We're happy to have conversations and go back and forth about what might work and what the format could be and how we might structure things together before the proposal process on behalf of the author or the editor, so that we're kind of engaged in that dialogue. And then in that way, Gareth and I become champions of the work as well, because we've had a series of engaging conversations, and we're excited to see the proposal come in. We're excited to be a part of the kind of back and forth process. It's not just something where Gareth and I want to just sit back and then see what comes to us and then we thumbs up or thumbs down. We want to be kind of actively engaged in that process as a resource in any way that would be helpful.
I mean, it's always been, this is part of the impetus with the journal as well, I think. And, as we both of us take a genuine pleasure in helping bring other people's work, to the fore. I think it's, we're both teachers and we enjoy that in our work as teachers, and love it. I love when people come with ideas and they say, is this so yes is the usual answer, please come to us with ideas. And I think, again, that's part of why we wanted to keep the series invitation fairly broad, because if you've got something cool and interesting, I'd love to try and get it published, and we're not quite sure what that looks like yet, but let's talk about it.
I think that's a great approach, really, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of people can be put off by the mystification around the publishing processes, and people can be put off because they're not sure if they have enough experience. And I think that certain editors, certain series, and certain publishers and publications can try to to perpetuate that a little bit. So I think it's really admirable that you're breaking down some of those barriers and trying to engage with people, when their ideas in the gestation period, to give them a bit of confidence and support. And I imagine that that's great for early career researchers. And we should probably add that, you're obviously open and willing to ECRs and to, anyone really, right? As long as the idea is good and the quality's there, it will be peer reviewed. So, don't shy away from submitting, or at least reaching out to Bryan and Gareth with your idea. I think that's something that we should definitely highlight.
Absolutely, yeah, and the peer review, we lean into that heavily as well. It's I think that sometimes that can seem intimidating. I'm intimidated by it whenever I write anything. But it's a collaboration, and the idea is it's not policing people's work as much as trying to sort of help present it in the way that's going to be appealing to what we understand to be the market. So really about championing people's work and celebrating it and helping them sort of burnish it and present it, in a way that's sort of that's hopefully suitable to what peer reviewers and Intellect and us can see as the potential readership.
And let's talk a little bit about submissions, though, a bit further. Is there anything that you both are like really keen to encourage people to talk about? Are there any areas that you feel like, oh yeah, we really want someone to to cover that? Or are there any areas within the discipline that are important that you'd really like maybe to use this opportunity to sort of suggest to people we'd be open to a proposal on this topic? Bryan, I'll go to you first, and then Gareth, please chime in.
The thing that I'm most excited about is the thing that you're passionate about. It doesn't have to align with what Gareth and I were thinking we would get. We have people talking to us about the importance of groove and of teaching groove, and groove is a kind of a framework for understanding things. And if you're so into groove, then we start getting into groove as well. If you want an anti-capitalist manifesto critiquing structures of higher ed and contemporary engagement in popular music education, that's the thing I want as well. And one of the things that Gareth and I, well, I don't want to speak for Gareth, but I do all the time. So one of the things that Gareth and I, want to kind of put out there, it's not our version of what contemporary music making and learning is. As someone who's been getting into DJing, I was excited to get a submission on DJing. But if there's people that are really passionate about Jay Dilla and that work and educational frameworks to understand the music of Jay Dilla, then it's like, oh, that's really exciting. And so an author's passion, because it's fun to come up with ideas. I could come up with book ideas all day long, as we probably all know, and anyone listening to this, the work of editing the chapters, of writing from taking it from idea to actually getting things down and going through the editing process is a lot of work. And so what really is going to help drive our kind of collaboration in this book series is an author that's like, I'm really interested in showcasing these voices that wouldn't get heard, or shining a light on these perspectives, or these practices that don't normally get featured. And so we purposely want that kind of broad framework. But if there's an area that an author is passionate about, that's the thing that we want. Because if anyone who's writing a proposal based on what they think Gareth and I might be looking for, if it's not where their heart and passions are, it's just likely not going to end up being a successful project, because it takes commitment to that idea and to the project to make it a reality.
Thank you, Bryan. And Gareth, anything to add to that?
Oh, Bryan stole my answer. Actually, he said he was going to speak for me. He did it pretty well. So actually, with this first book that's out, that we just had out this week, Kayari and Thompson and Rajan's book about if colours could be heard, it's so throughout that process there was a bit of a fight with some peer reviewers, which was kind of exciting, and I was very, very pleased with the outcome. Well, we both were pleased with the outcome. Here I am speaking for Bryan. So there was one of the things I think the book does especially well, and that the editors were unrelenting in their pursuit of, was preserving the sort of authentic voices of the authors. And we had peer reviewers pushing back and saying this reads as non-scholarly, or this seems inappropriate for this forum. And we said, well, no, it isn't, because it's if you can't, the idea is to present these people's voices, and if you start framing it incorrectly, or we start subduing them, or if it isn't that. And so I think that's, and there has to be a balance. It has to be legible, and it has to be what's the word I'm looking for? It has to flow, so people can. It has to be engaging and compelling to read. But we were so keen to follow the editor's vision of keeping the contributors' voices. I'm glad we did that. So I think that's, again, kind of really just backing off what Bryan said about, it has to be your passion project. That's the thing we're most excited about, is what you're most excited about. And in that instance, it was really, we want to foreground the voices of people who we don't get to hear from, and we want to foreground the actual voices.
I think that's important, and you have conveyed that. I think that is something that is quite unique about the series as well. So yeah, I think that's important to highlight. I think something else that seems important to me is that you're interested in collaborative teams, and that includes, of course, maybe practical and scholarly, in terms of a balance, in terms of who's involved in the project, but then also in terms of the type of material that you're looking to for people to submit and then for us to publish. So have you managed to balance that sort of scholarly rigor with the need for readability and relevance, and also, as a caveat there, just about having musicians as well as teachers and researchers all involved in these projects? I welcome you both to share your answers. Bryan, did you want to go first on that?
Yeah, sure. I agree that the diversity perspective is important. If it's only the kind of usual suspects doing research that we might anticipate that they're going to do, submitting to the people who are going to read, who are the usual suspects, then we're not actually shining a light on the practices and perspectives that aren't normally featured. Often the most interesting things that are happening on the ground, happening in the field, are happening by teachers and community music facilitators and in music therapy initiatives, and we don't get to necessarily understand all those things if it's just those of us in higher ed writing for those of us in higher ed. And so one is gathering those voices and finding where they are and encouraging them to submit. And so it's not just, again, the usual suspects. And two, it is a commitment to working with folks who might not have written in a scholarly voice traditionally. Gareth touched on that a little bit earlier, of wanting to feature their kind of authentic voice and their perspective there. And so I think one of the things that, if we're thinking about an edited book, or if we're thinking about submissions for authors, it's not just people that we're going to interact with at conferences, but we need to be kind of tapped into some of the scenes that might be incubators for these interesting stories, and try to provide an opportunity to be able to connect with folks there who might have something to say, and they're just looking for a pathway and a support structure to be able to share those things.
Thanks, Bryan. Gareth, any thoughts on that?
I think outside of higher education, people who do higher education for a living, a book, writing a book is rarely the answer to any of your questions. So, this comes with the caveat that people who are going to be submitted to this series are likely to be people who need to for promotion and tenure, and because it's their job. So, with that caveat that actual practitioners who are have no need to write books won't be writing books, but I think it's sort of there's outside of music. I was just involved in theatre production, for instance, and I know in dance and in theatre, lots of the time people's output is more practical than in music, where the answer is please write an essay. So hopefully we can get people who that kind of intersection. Maybe there's some people. I'm not sure exactly what it looks like, honestly, because if you don't need to write books, maybe that's not what you want to do. But I think there's. Hopefully, we're hopeful that there'll be some submissions from people who are at that kind of intersection, without knowing exactly what it looks like. There's so much, I keep saying cool stuff, but there are cool things happening. So this is where the collaboration comes in, right? Maybe there's someone who's, who absolutely needs to write books and can't stop writing prose, like me. I do a lot of it. As does Bryan. So, working with someone who's doing some really interesting things, but maybe writing isn't their forte, or it's not their, first sort of go-to. So, who knows? But I'm hoping there's, and we're hoping that people will find each other, and there can be a scholarly discussion about cool things happening. And who knows what that is?
Yeah, but you're basically open to it. That's the important thing, and that can be multiple different perspectives. And it can be from musicians, and it'd be great if people are collaborating, if you get scholars and musicians working together, and scholars who are musicians, maybe opening that up to different perspectives as well. So, I think the main thing that I'm getting from this conversation is that you're really embracing lots of different points of view, and you're very open to being challenged, as well as kind of, for different perspectives.
Well, we're grateful to the publisher, because you Intellect is very open to this. So, and sorry, I just spoke over you, but thank you for that, because it's good to have a collaborator who doesn't have a kind of defined sense of exactly what each book should look like. There's no template, which we really, I'm repeating what Bryan said, but we very much appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that as well, because I think that's an important point. And and as publishers try to save money and try to create more cost-effective outputs, it can be easier to silo things and to create these economies of scale and like simple outputs, but it does stifle conversation, I think. So I think we certainly want to support that. So I think we've got a good collaboration going on. And I want to just move on from the book series though, and just ask you a few what I call quick time questions, just to kind of end off the podcast. A few questions, about you and your own kind of engagement with music and different bits and pieces. So if you're game for that, I'd love to ask you a few. So Bryan, I'm gonna start with you, and you mentioned that you've been DJing, but I wanted to ask you a bit about game-changing technology, and from your perspective, what do you see as being one of the most single impactful pieces of technology in music making today?
Oh man, that's a great question.
Big one.
Recently, just the ubiquity of like stem separators, being able to divide music into its component parts, and then being able to kind of manipulate that. Whereas previously those tools were reserved for more expensive softwares, or they were less accessible. Now it's like anyone with a smartphone, anyone with a DJ controller that has stem separation. It's really kind of democratized the creative side of music technology. And so for me, it's almost less and I know this is supposed to be a quick answer. It's more like just the affordability and the ubiquity of access to technologies that previously there were these barriers to engagement with. And so with my own students, seeing them kind of create their own remixes and take existing pieces and sampling that and bringing it into their own songwriting, it's just kind of this exciting opportunity now that we see through kind of the affordability and accessibility of AI infused technologies that are kind of changing the way that we engage in music making.
Really good point. And I've also noticed a lot of really interesting things being done using this sort of STEM technology, where people can effectively create clean remixes by extracting different parts of different component parts of songs. So yeah, you can do some crazy Biggie remix over something, and it will be really professional sounding. That's interesting. And Gareth, what about yourself? Same question. Any game-changing tech? Anything that really has kind of infused you, or that you think is really impactful?
Yeah. The question you sent us was, what's the single most impactful piece of technology in music making today? And the answer is the drum kit. It's I play it, I love it, and I think it's not digital technology. I realize I'm bending the answer, but it's the drums. I'm an analog man. I like to move, and I find twiddling my fingers isn't. It's not exciting enough. Big movements, drum kit all the way. I'll say it as many times as you like. The drum kit.
And what about like we talk about controllers, but what about things like MPCs and classic those kind of drum machines or sample based machines? Do you get the same physicality from hitting the pads, or for you is it going to be the same?
I want large pieces of wood and 12-inch surfaces that I did. I'm talking like big. That I need. No, it's easy to miss them. I need bigger. I need like a 22-inch crash.
I was going to say, you're like Eloy or whatever from Slipknot. You need that gong. You need the bigger the better.
I have a vision for a drum kit that has 2 gongs at 45 degrees either side of me that I can just kind of. I will realize that goal.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. It's not about tenure. It's about double gong. That's it. Thanks, guys. That's really cool answers and quite different as well. Moving on, though, I wanted to ask you about an unforgettable live experience, and what's the most memorable concert you've ever attended, and why has it stuck with you? I'll go back to Bryan.
Yeah, this is hard to choose. I've benefited from a lot of really compelling live concert experiences. But one that has stuck out for me recently is when Rage Against the Machine was touring again, 20 years after I saw them the first time. Just going to that live show in Madison Square Garden, and the energy and the musicianship, and Tom Morello as a guitarist, and it was as vibrant and relevant as it ever was. And that's I saw Black Sabbath after they had been doing it for 40 years, and you kind of forgive certain things of like, oh, it's Sabbath, it's incredible, and they're older, and we don't expect the same things, and they can't hit the same notes. And just how Rage came in and just melted my face the entirety of it, and how it was just it was me when I was 19 seeing them in a club in LA, being blown away from them, and doing that again over 20 years later was a kind of a memorable experience. So I'll go with my Rage Against the Machine more recent concert experience.
Oh, and that's particularly interesting because it wasn't the first time you'd seen them, so it was kind of almost like a bookend.
Yeah, and hopefully it's a middle chapter. I never want to break up. They don't need to release new music, but if they just keep playing the albums that were important from the 90s when I was as moved by music as I'll ever be, that would be fantastic.
You've probably seen the meme, the frog meme, with basically from some of the recent protests that have been taking place in the US.
Yes.
There's almost like a Gandhian non-violent movement in the sense of this frog costume that's become kind of iconic, where frog versus ice, effectively. But that was obviously put to the soundtrack of Rage Against the Machine very effectively, and I think it just proved how impactful that music still is, and how necessary it still is. So yeah.
Agreed. And that's the power of contemporary music is, Radiohead is as relevant now as they've ever been, and young people are discovering bands that I was discovering at the same age. And I think social media and TikTok and protest movements and all of these things are reasons why. But it's fascinating to just see how the next generation is engaging with similar music, and how certain bands that I connected with are connecting with people, 30 years younger than I am, but who are experiencing things in similar ways. And so I think it's a fantastic time to be engaged in contemporary music and learning and working with students who are creating their own music and becoming the next bands that might influence others. And, it's an exciting time.
I guess the other thing for you guys is that because you're working with students and with younger people, I guess, as well, just in general, you're probably able to, you're probably encountering more of these trends and being able to be more focused on contemporary music than some people of your age, let's say. But like, what about your unforgettable live moment, Gareth? Anything that sticks out for you?
Yeah, I had a good think about this, and there was one concert that really changed my life. Was Keith Tippett, the late Keith Tippett, is a free improvising piano player. He was a jazz pianist who moved to a career in free improvisation. And I went to see him, I think it was 1998, in the Norwegian church in Cardiff Bay. It's a small wooden church, and he played this solo piano concert. And there was maybe 150 people in the room, and it was absolutely extraordinary. He just played a solo piano, and he did all kinds of weird things inside the piano and with these incredible overtones he creates, and it was just created. He held the room. You could hear a pin drop in there for an hour and a half. The guy just played solo piano stuff, and everyone was hanging on and it was just it was quiet music as well, but everyone was just so leaning in, listening, and poised for whatever was going to happen next. And it was like on this kind of like the sense of nowness, the kind of presentness that everyone was. I've never been anywhere that people have been more present than that moment. It was absolutely extraordinary. I had no idea you could do that with music. I had no idea that a person could be so creative and so inventive and hold everyone's attention so intensely for so long. It blew my mind. And yeah, and I mean, he came to teach a class the next day. He taught a regular class. That was the Thursday night. He came to the class on Friday, and there was this kind of glow about him. Like he said that had been in his top 3 or 5. I think he said his top 3 performances ever. That's after a 25-year career. He was like, no, that was a genuinely special moment. He's performed globally, and I was like, I knew it. There was one Thursday night in Cardiff Bay in 1998, and it was just extraordinary.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm going to stay with you, Gareth, and ask you the next one because it's on a very similar theme, really. So I wanted to ask you about a life-changing album. Are there any, albums that are, you'd consider a favorite, or again, it maybe been quite monumental or impactful upon you or your playing? Yeah,
so there's a Miles Davis album called A Tribute to Jack Johnson, and it's Miles Davis playing trumpet with John McLaughlin ripping, shredding guitar, and I forget who the bass player is because even though Bryan plays the bass, I'm forgetful of bass players. There is a bass player on the album whose name was on the tip of my tongue, and Billy Cobham on drums, and it's the energy on the album is killer. The whole thing is it's this big shuffle for like a 45-minute shuffle, and it's just this blinding. Jack Johnson is a boxer, so it's this Miles Davis kind of as an amateur boxer, and this album is a trumpet, bass, guitar, and drums explosion in tribute to this boxer, and it was like the amount of energy on that album is, again, kind of just blew my mind. You could play that intensely for that long. I was like, that's game on. I want to do that.
Oh, awesome. Well, one of the reasons I ask these questions is because our audience can go away and try and track down some of these things, and I think you've just done a really good job of explaining why that was so exciting for you. And Bryan, what about yourself? Any albums that kind of stand out?
Yeah, these are for musicians, these are the hardest questions. For Gareth. I mean, Rage Against the Machine's first album was seminal, but I would put OK Computer up there. I don't know if it's my favorite Radiohead album. I mean, maybe In Rainbows is, but I was a teenager when OK Computer came out, and you felt like you were discovering something that not everyone knew. And this is before the internet, before streaming services. So you had to have a friend who had the album, and you would go to their place and like just sit and listen to music. And so I feel like I experienced music then just different than I can now, because when's the last time you went over to someone's house and sat there? We had no phones, we had no internet. The whole purpose was to just go and sit and listen to music. And so I would say OK Computer one, because it's this incredible album that everyone should be listening to regularly, and two, because of the way in which I experienced that album is something that I likely won't be able to recreate in a meaningful way with like friends at that age when you're feeling things and the purpose of being there. So even though it's not a controversial pick, I will say OK Computer.
Brilliant, marvelous. It's cool. I think you have tapped into something there which I consider very lucky that I experienced, and this isn't meant to sound like some moody old man here, so don't worry about it, audience. So this is kind of just a positive, but again, the limitations of technology and how they impact music is something that's always really interested me, because I'm big into 90s hip hop, and of course the limitations of the technology they had and their lack of maybe traditional musical education meant that people were doing things that created certain sounds. So that New York grimy hip hop sound comes out of limitation, right? So that's always been really interesting to me. But again, like when we were younger, you didn't have the internet and you didn't have AI and various other technologies. So when you encountered something new, you had to kind of like, you really had to put all your energy into the music, the lyrics, the liner notes, and to the information you could get a hand of, which often meant like community as well, and like going to the shows and just trying to pick up as much info as possible, while also not looking like a nerd or not being like, oh yeah, I know what's coming. Yeah, you kind of, there's all this kind of like cutting your teeth stuff around music. So I feel quite lucky to be in the age I am and being in that kind of analog digital divide there, where you couldn't just, if you didn't understand the lyric or you didn't get a reference, you couldn't just Google it instantaneously or whatever else. And often there's albums that I've only actually understood the lyric 10 or 20 plus years later, that I've actually walked through a certain neighborhood or been somewhere that's been referenced. You're like, okay, I get it. But you kind of you weren't able just to kind of Google and tap into things. So I think the way we experience music collectively, because you didn't have an infinite access to music, it'd be like if someone had 20 albums when you were like 15, so wow, they got a hell of a collection. And you'd bring over your 10, and then everyone would get together and you'd share things. And again, that's not to be some moody old man saying, oh, I wish it was like it used to be, but it's just the limitations of the way that we experience music and culture in some ways in general. I think gave us a certain pathway to understanding it, and certain we had to focus a lot of energy on certain bits. Yeah, great answers. And I wanted to ask as well, maybe just about album artwork, and whether liner notes and artwork and things is important to you. Gareth, is there any albums that stick out that have like really amazing, gorgeous artwork, or is that never really a big deal for you?
Well, you sent this question yesterday, and honestly, my band, The Eruptors, is releasing new music for the first time in over a decade, and the world is waiting, of course, for this. And we have, the album is going to be called Spewin' Lava, and we've collaborated with AI to create an album that's an erupting volcano, and with a silhouette of the band from one of our earlier gigs in Tooting in the early 2000s. I was wearing my Viking horns and full-length leather coat. So that album artwork is extraordinary. It's the silhouette of the legendary Eruptors with a erupting volcano in the background. It's everything I'd ever hoped for in album artwork.
Well, legendary self-plug as well. I've got to give you some props for that. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we definitely need to have that through the social media or something, so people can reference that afterwards. So I'll be happy with that. And Bryan, how about you? Do you really engage with like album artwork, and do other things that really stick out to you, or is it not really that important?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think certainly was. I mean, I will be old man soapbox. Like I have albums on my wall, but that I can also access and take them out. I've got a record player here in my office. But the idea of the physical connection of opening it up and seeing the lyrics, reading the liner notes, knowing who produced certain albums and knowing who the musicians were. My own children, they'll be singing a song. I'm like, oh, who sings that? And they'll be like, oh, I don't know. I learned it on TikTok. Like the connection to the kind of physical elements of, they haven't had to mow a lawn to get allowance to go to the mall to buy a tape or a CD, to, like the kind of physical connection there. I'm going to make everything about Rage Against the Machine in my life, but like their first album where you have the monk who's, you know, self-immolating, lighting himself on fire, and what a visually kind of arresting image that is, was one of these kind of first engagements for me of like the power of an image to connect to the music. And then, you know, you have like the Spinal Tap album and some of the visuals there. But I think the visual and the physical and the liner notes and, you know, the design of Bitches Brew, which is one of the albums that I have up. There's just that compelling image. Going back to the Journal of Popular Music Education, we changed the cover image for every issue, hopefully as a reflection of the content of the issue, because we think that cover images are compelling. I mean, I know I have my blur on, but like if Colors Could Be Heard just doesn't connect with in the same way without that visual image for me. And so I think, you know, music is oral, but there's all the other aspects that music can connect with. And so I think, that's for a lot of people, maybe our age, was a big part of the kind of physical nature of it, and the imagery that was carefully chosen, and the track order list, and all of those things that kind of play into that. But yeah, I'm a sucker for all those things. I have records up on my wall. I have all of the issues of the Journal of Popular Music Education up on my wall facing me right now, because I can look at the cover image and I see our colleague Jared Scheel. I see Jasmine on guitar. I see, you know, a collage of a logo from an album, and it kind of connects me to the content of that issue in the same way that a vinyl might have that image that kind of, you know, you associate with that album. When I think of this album, I'm thinking of the image as much as I'm thinking about the songs initially.
Well, thank you both for sharing that. I'm glad it's not just me. Throwing it about a little bit, I wanted to ask, if you were hosting a dinner party and you could invite 5 guests, they could be dead, they can be alive, they can be from any period in history. Who are you going to invite? Who's going to make the cut? Gareth, any thoughts on that?
So this was tricky. I stayed up late last night trying to think of a good answer for this. I would invite Henry Giroux, critical pedagogue, also a former Boston University employee, Kin Vu, my current colleague at Boston University, my partner Ostina for sure, and Bryan. So I think that would be an interesting. Oh, hang on, how many is that? That's Bryan.
That's 4.
Oh, yeah, Bjork is the missing ingredient.
Oh, there you go. Just to spice it up a little bit. Yeah, I like that.
I think that's the perfect dinner party right there.
Oh, that's awesome. We'll see that I did throw this question at you guys yesterday, because I throw it at people quite often, and often you don't get much of an answer. So I thought I would give you a little bit of time to prepare. Bryan, did you have any time to think about this one?
Well, so something, James, that you learned about me is I didn't read your questions at all.
I'm seeing the pants always with Bryan.
Yeah. No, I didn't read the questions. Not because, one, I was traveling, but 2, I was like, oh, it'll be better if I'm more organic and I haven't thought through things. So the moment that you said that, I was like, oh, please pick Gareth first. So I would also invite Gareth. You know, I have to invite him now that he invited me to his party. But I would probably have an eclectic mix. I'm a big Barack Obama fan, and I miss him talking. So I would invite Barack. I would invite Tom Morello, because he's my ultimate musician hero. And then I would probably, if they don't have to be alive, I would invite Bowie, and I would invite Prince. You know, I would invite and maybe Tom York. Like, and I know that Prince and Tom, like, the conversation might get strange at sometimes because they're not effusive conversationalists, but I think it could be weird in a good way, if I can put it that way.
The question said additionally, dead or alive. I just don't want dead people at my dinner party. I just think it would smell very strange.
Yeah, Gareth is literal. I think we're assuming that they might be among the living as they're eating with us. But
okay.
I didn't read the question, so I don't know.
A ghost in the machine. Okay, no, brilliant answers. And you kind of, Bryan, yours especially made me think a little bit of that Mike Judd show, Tales from the Tour Bus, where he animates and interviews different people from various. Well, he did one series on funk and one on country music, and he effectively interviews all these great people who worked with the likes of Prince, or he has like Bootsy Collins and people like that on there. And then he animates the stories that they tell. Fantastic, but you really get the impression of how some of these characters are used to interact. And I feel like both your dinner parties would make for a lot of fun interaction. So thank you. And my final question for today, bit of one out of left field, and it's actually about time travel. And someone asked me this when I was at a conference the other day, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to start asking that in the podcast from time to time, I think. So I wanted to just ask, if you could travel through time, would you go backwards or forwards? And are there any particular reasons why? And I'll go to Gareth first, because I get the impression he may have read the question in advance.
We'll give Bryan some time to prepare an answer. So I thought about this yesterday, and I'm gonna. Maybe it's a non-answer, but forwards. I want to go forwards in time because I already am going forwards in time. And despite my kind of, I think, constitutional grumpiness, I'm an optimist, and I think the future is bright. Despite the way it frequently appears. I think I'm excited about the future, and we are inexorably moving forward in time anyway. Also, next Thursday, I'm getting a new tattoo, which I'm very excited about. So I can't wait for that. I'd hate to go backwards in time because I was younger and more foolish somehow. So forwards in time, please. Absolutely.
Good answer. Thank you very much, Gareth. And Bryan, what are you thinking?
I would go forward in time a week to see if Gareth's tattoo was a mistake, so that I could warn him not to do it. I have many follow-up questions. Like, do I know now? Do I know then what I know now if I go back? But I lived in New York City in Manhattan for a number of years, and I was a music teacher who was waking up at 5 a.m. to get to the classroom and all these things. And I often feel like, oh man, I wish I could go back just like 2 decades and just kind of relive my life, see more live music, connect with more things. The future scares me, if I'm being totally honest. And so I think I might not understand all of the things. And it might be depressing if I go in 50 years and it just looks exactly like it looks now. And I'll be like, oh, where are the flying cars? Where are the holograms in our eyeballs? Where are the fun things? So I'll leave that to the unknown.
But Bryan, imagine how many books we'll have in the series if we can just bring this back. 50 years from now, there's going to be 100. This is going to be. That's
true.
Honestly,
I'll go forward so I can see all of the wonderful books. I'm guessing no one's made it to this point of the podcast, but if you're still with us, I would go forward to see the book that you're going to submit and write and see it, because holding a thing is valuable, and I keep holding this book because I'm excited that it's here in a way that if I had a PDF of this book, it would still be exciting, but this is just better. So
and if you go back in time, I mean, even 2 years ago, there were no books in this series. I'm only interested in the future.
I take it back. I'm going to the future to check out our book series and all of Gareth's tattoos.
Well, on that note, on that bombshell, I want to say thank you both very much for your time today. It's been wonderful talking to you about various topics indeed, but contemporary music making and learning. The book series is out now, a couple books on there. If you can go back in time, back to the future, I don't know, there'll definitely be a lot more books on the horizon, and it's been really exciting to kind of get your perspectives on the vision and the future of the series as well. But thank you both very much for your time today. Thanks for being fun and answering my silly questions. It's been wonderful having you on as guests, and wishing you all the success, not only with the book series, but with your various other projects too. Any final thoughts, Bryan?
No, just to say, if you've got an idea, reach out. We want to talk through it. We want to connect. Maybe it's a better project for the Journal of Popular Music Education. Maybe this book project is right for the series, or maybe we can recommend something else. But we would love to engage in dialogue if you're interested.
And Gareth, any final thoughts from you?
Thank you for having us. It's kind of you to invite us, and I enjoyed chatting. Thank you so much.
Well, again, thank you both for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everyone who's been listening. Do check out the series, and of course, do give Gareth and Bryan a bit of a Google and see all the other wonderful work they've been doing. But that's it for now. We'll see you on In Conversation next time. Thank you and goodbye.
Cheers. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.